As I understand it, you believe a sea change is happening in the crypto world and that mainstream acceptance is coming and here to stay. What do you want, or what do you expect FalconX's piece of the larger pie, what do you expect that piece to look like going forward?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Emily. At a high level, I think FalconX, just to define that so that we understand what part of the market we play, FalconX is a one-stop shop built specifically for institutions. We help institutions all the way from trading, credit, clearing, and custody through our partners. So essentially, I think one of the biggest transitions that's happening right now, because of a lot of traditional institutions coming to the space, is the expectation for the era of brokerages, right? No longer are they looking for simple workflows on a retail-centric exchange. They are looking for very complex institutionalized workflows like T+1 business day settlement, a leverage, till 3x, 4x leverage, while having the ability to delay settle. So from that standpoint, a lot of institutions coming from the traditional world are expecting the brokerage services that they're used to. And that is one place where FalconX as a company would love to basically play.
So you've been in the process of raising money. The valuation keeps going up. How do you want to use that money, and why keep raising money?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of the fundraise itself, right? We want to be able to be in a position to power the growth that's happening to the industry more broadly, Emily. The first and foremost, if you look at our growth, in just a matter of 1 year, less than a year, with a team of 40, 45 people, we had to scale up our transaction volumes to about $6 billion on a monthly basis. We grew 12 times in 1 year. In terms of revenues grew by about 15 times. The last 4 months, 4 to 5 months, about 100 or so institutions came to the platform. So what that means is we need infrastructure that can scale seamlessly, can provide the same level of trust and reliability. So all of that means like we need to be hiring on the engineering and the product side of things. And the second part, Emily, as a lot of institutions come in, we've been in the front and center of that. And if you look at the diversity of institutions coming in, it's growing a lot, right? It's no longer just the traditional hedge funds. A lot of corporate treasuries, public and private, are thinking. A lot of retail aggregators are thinking. A lot of neobanks are thinking. So when these customers come in, they expect a much more nuanced answer in terms of what is Bitcoin? How should I go about it? How should we get the exposure in the right way? How should we custody it? So what that means is it translates to a lot more high-touch, white-glove service in the form of customer success teams. So we're going to be using our money primarily for scaling up our engineering and product teams, and the second part on the customer success side so that customers have a good experience.
So what do you make of Coinbase's listing getting pushed back? Obviously, Coinbase going public, is being considered as this sort of moment where crypto could go mainstream, and it certainly is symbolic, but there's still scrutiny happening. Yeah. Isn't that another challenge?
I think it's actually a good thing for institutional crypto, Emily. I think first off, Coinbase listing, it's a defining moment for crypto as an industry, I think. Why? If you look at the sources of funding that are shaping the industry, it's like either selling tokens for your future cash flows or venture capital money. Now, for venture capitalists, for the first time, they saw a company that's incubated 8 years back go all the way to public market listing at $70 billion or plus. What that means is for a lot of traditional venture capitalists, it's a nice validation of what the space could mean. As a result, we're seeing a very good influx of extremely high quality money. I think that's very powerful. Now, on the second part of the question that you asked, in terms of what does it mean, institutions in general are looking for better regulatory clarity. If you look at what's going on, some of the details are not available, but having a tighter set of expectations around market data integrity, how trades are reported, all these things, the clarity around that is going to be very powerful for institutions in general for proving things like best execution. So while the delay is, it pushes the excitement off by 2, 3, 4 weeks, it's actually a welcome change for institutions in crypto. It's also supported by data. Last 2, 3 times major regulatory moves happened, institutions reacted very well, whether it's like the news around BitMEX or USDT. So likewise, we are beginning to hear good things about most of the institutions working with us. They're not very worried. In fact, they're welcoming the opportunity that regulators are looking at market data and all of this closely.
Is there any M&A interest around Falcon X? Have financial institutions been shopping?
So especially over the last 6 months, yes. A lot of major banks, they're all considering the build versus buy decision, primarily because there are a lot of their end customers are reaching out to them in terms of understanding what crypto means to them. So yes, over the last 6 months, it's been a lot of inbound, not just from US banks and institutions, but also worldwide.
So Bitcoin now at $54,700. I've had folks tell me it's going to infinity, the moon, and beyond. Give me a more realistic number. Where do you think this is headed?
So, yeah, I mean, I've seen crazy numbers come up, but I'm not sure if all of those things are justified. But what I can definitely tell, Emily, is this time there is a much more fundamental shift than what we saw in 2017, crypto bull run. What is that fundamental shift? Especially within the backdrop of world printing a lot of money, $6 to $8 trillion at least, a lot of institutions are beginning to see Bitcoin as an inflationary hedge, especially with Paul Tudor Jones and Stanley Druckenmiller talking about it. That really brought a lot of validity to traditional institutions and traditional hedge funds. So that is one aspect. Now, the second fundamental shift that we are seeing is the tokenization of the US dollar. What is really interesting, Emily, I mean, from our standpoint, when we look at how these institutions are evolving, they all came in for Bitcoin exposure because of the inflationary hedge. After that, they started, some of them, a small portion although, started experimenting with Ethereum. Now, the third shift that we are seeing is instead of using US dollar as basically the base for these transactions, they're beginning to use USDC, which is a stable coin that's pegged to US dollar. The beauty of USDC is like it's 24/7, you can work on over the weekends as well. As crypto is moving over the weekends, a lot of these traditional institutions who never had the infrastructure to trade over the weekends now are trading over the weekends and really leveraging the efficiency of USDC being there to improve the balance sheet efficiency there. So with all these fundamental shifts coming in, I'm much more stable and optimistic compared to the 2017s of the world, Emily.
You also think institutions and corporations are all going to be investing within a few years. Do you think companies like Uber, who've said, we're not investing right now, we're not speculating, and others will be eating their words? And at what point do they say, well, we're going to invest in it too, in your view?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. If you look at the interest of corporate treasuries coming in, we saw the first wave of them come in October, November. And a lot of them were just dipping their toes, right? I mean, yes, there is this 8% Bitcoin exposure from Tesla, but that is far and few. Most of the times we see about 1% to 2%. Now, they're very cautiously coming in, especially with the recent announcements with some major companies coming in. There's a lot more activity. I mean, we are in conversations with meaningful number of Fortune 500 companies. Now, some of them are very skeptical. They're like, yeah, I mean, Bitcoin exposure, tell us about Bitcoin, we're not sure. But what is interesting, Emily, is the most conservative of those corporate treasuries are also looking at, yeah, maybe not Bitcoin exposure, we're not ready for it, but yield generation in crypto is much, much more efficient than what you're seeing in the traditional markets. A commercial bank would potentially give you 80 to 130, 140 basis points. On the crypto side of the equation, whether it's Falcon or players like us, we're seeing about 600 to 700 basis points. And that is where even the most conservative people are jumping in.